Welcome, everyone. Today we're exploring one of the most fascinating quirks of human cognition, a phenomenon you have almost certainly experienced probably dozens of times without ever having a name for it. It's called the Baader-Meinhof Phenomenon, and once you understand it, I promise you'll start noticing it everywhere, which is, ironically, exactly the point. Let me take you through what this cognitive bias is, why it happens, and why it matters far beyond cocktail party trivia. By the end of this session, you'll have a new lens through which to examine your own perceptions. And that alone is worth the journey. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the experience itself, that uncanny feeling when something you just learned suddenly seems to be everywhere. Then we'll define it properly, trace its remarkably unusual origin story, and unpack the cognitive machinery that drives the effect. From there, we'll examine the everyday triggers you've likely encountered, and then pivot to the places where this illusion can genuinely mislead us. In boardrooms, in laboratories, in how we interpret the world around us. By the end, you'll have practical tools to recognize and manage this bias in your own thinking. Think back to the last time this happened to you. Maybe you learned the word ephemeral for the first time, and then within 48 hours, you heard it on a podcast, saw it in a headline, and a colleague used it in a meeting. That jolt of, is the universe sending me a message? That's the frequency illusion. It feels uncanny, almost conspiratorial, as if the world has suddenly rearranged itself around your new knowledge. But here's the crucial insight. Those references were always there, every single one. Your brain simply didn't have a cognitive tag for that information before, so it dissolved into the background noise of daily life. Now that you're primed, your attentional spotlight catches it every time. Let's give this experience its proper name and understand what's really happening. So what exactly is the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon? Formally, it's called the frequency illusion, and it's a well-documented cognitive bias in the psychological literature. Here's the core insight, and it's deceptively simple. The actual frequency of the thing hasn't changed at all. Your brain's filtering system has simply been recalibrated. Two distinct cognitive processes join forces to create this effect. First, selective attention. Once something becomes personally relevant, your brain unconsciously begins scanning for it in the environment. Second, confirmation bias. Every time you spot it, your brain treats that sighting as evidence that the thing is genuinely more common. It's a self-reinforcing loop. Stanford linguist Arnold Zwicky gave it the scientific name frequency illusion in 2005, and it's sometimes called red car theory. Think about a red car, and suddenly, they're all you see on the highway. Now, the name Baader-Meinhof. Where does it come from? It's one of the strangest origin stories in the cognitive sciences. In the 1970s, West Germany was gripped by the violent activities of the Red Army faction, also known as the Baader-Meinhof Gang, a far-left militant group that carried out bombings, kidnappings, and assassinations. Fast forward to 1994, a man named Terry Mullen writes a letter to a Minnesota newspaper. He describes mentioning the Baader-Meinhof Gang to a friend in casual conversation, a group that hadn't been newsworthy for decades. The very next day, that same friend spots an article about the gang in the newspaper and points it out to Mullen. Mullen was so struck by the coincidence that he proposed naming the phenomenon after the group. In 2005, Stanford linguistics professor Arnold Zwicky gave it scientific rigor by coining frequency illusion, and from there it spread through internet culture into mainstream psychology and behavioral economics. Now that we know what the frequency illusion is and where its unusual name comes from, let's look under the hood. What's actually happening in your brain when this phenomenon takes hold? This isn't a glitch or a malfunction. It's a byproduct of how your attentional system evolved to manage an overwhelming flood of sensory data every waking moment. The frequency illusion runs on two cognitive engines working in tandem. Let me walk you through the cycle step by step. It begins when you encounter something novel, a word, a product, a medical condition. If it captures your interest, it becomes personally relevant. Step 2. Your brain's selective attention system gives that information a priority pass. Out of the millions of stimuli bombarding you every single moment, this one now gets flagged as important. Step 3. Your pattern detection machinery goes to work, and every subsequent instance of that thing, in conversation, in media, in your environment, registers as significant. The crucial point is that the objective base rate of occurrence hasn't budged. Step 4 is where it locks in. The confirmation loop kicks in, and each sighting feels like new evidence that the thing is genuinely everywhere. Here's what I want you to remember. Your brain filters out roughly 99% of sensory input. Noticing something new doesn't mean it wasn't there before. It means your filter changed. Let's make this concrete with 4 classic triggers that virtually everyone has experienced. Learning a new word is perhaps the purest example. It suddenly seems to appear in books, podcasts, and conversation. What's happening is that your brain now has a cognitive tag for that word, so it no longer dissolves into the background noise of language. Buying a car generates the same effect, and it's one of the most commonly reported experiences. You purchase a specific make and model, and suddenly it's on every street. The purchase made it personally relevant, flipping your attentional switch. Discovering a new brand works identically. Advertisements you previously scrolled past now leap out because your reticular activating system has been primed. And there's a famous version among medical students. After reading about a rare disease, they start noticing its symptoms everywhere, and often convince themselves they have it. In every single case, the objective frequency hasn't changed, only your attention has. So far, the frequency illusion might seem like harmless cocktail party trivia, an amusing quirk of the mind. But let me show you where it gets serious. When this bias enters high-stakes environments like corporate boardrooms and scientific laboratories, the consequences can be significant. Let's examine what's at stake. Before we go further, I want to draw a distinction that often gets blurred, and confusing these two biases can distort your judgment. On the left, the frequency illusion makes you believe something is more common than it really is because you're noticing it more. On the right, the recency illusion, identified by the same linguist Arnold Zwicky, makes you believe something is newer than it actually is because you've only recently become aware of it. Consider this presentation itself. After today, you may start noticing references to the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon in articles or conversations and think, this concept is suddenly everywhere. That's the frequency illusion at work on you right now. Separately, you might assume the concept is a recent development when Zwicky actually formalized it over 20 years ago in 2005. That's the recency illusion. Both biases distort your perception, but they operate on different dimensions, frequency versus novelty. And in high-stakes settings, mistaking one for the other can lead to costly misjudgments. Let me make the stakes concrete with 2 real-world scenarios. In the boardroom, imagine a CEO who recently read about generative AI in a flight magazine. Suddenly, every business publication seems to cover it, every consultant mentions it, and it begins to feel like the defining trend of the decade. The CEO redirects significant resources toward an AI initiative. The issue isn't that AI is unimportant, it's that the CEO's perception of its urgency has been amplified by selective attention, not by objective strategic analysis. The frequency illusion is now driving capital allocation. In science, the stakes are arguably higher. During the early COVID-19 surge in Boston, physicians noticed what appeared to be a dramatic spike in cases of so-called COVID toes, swollen, discolored digits resembling chilblains. Clinics that normally saw 1 or 2 winter cases were suddenly fielding 15 to 20 appointments, prompting urgent research and public health alerts. But here's the hard question. Were cases genuinely rising, or were doctors, now hyper-primed by pandemic awareness, simply noticing and diagnosing a condition they'd previously overlooked? The frequency illusion makes that distinction deceptively difficult to draw, and getting it wrong can misdirect research funding, clinical resources, and public health messaging. So here's the final takeaway, and I hope it's a liberating one. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon isn't a defect in your cognitive architecture. It's a feature. Your brain evolved to prioritize what matters, to allocate scarce attentional resources to information that seems relevant. That's a survival adaptation, not a design flaw. The goal isn't to eliminate the illusion. You can't, and frankly, you wouldn't want to, because that same attentional machinery is what lets you focus on what's genuinely important. The goal is to recognize when the illusion is shaping your reality. When something feels uncannily everywhere, pause. Ask yourself, has the objective frequency of this thing actually changed, or has my brain's newest priority filter simply made it visible? Notice what you notice, and then question it. That single habit of mind is your most powerful tool against cognitive bias. Thank you.